My name's Alex Foster. I'm 48. For the past 18 years, I was the lead systems architect at a mid-sized aerospace tech company in Seattle. I'd been there longer than the CEO, longer than the building had indoor heating. I'd led a small team that grew into a department of 30 engineers, built it from scratch, trained every one of them. And last month, I was fired in under 5 minutes. Not for misconduct. Not because of a project failure. Not even because I asked for a raise. No, I was fired for being, and I quote, too expensive. It happened on a gray Thursday morning. You know the kind, drizzly, bone-cold, and somehow quieter than usual, like the world knows something you don't. I just finished leading a troubleshooting session for a satellite guidance system failure. My team resolved it in 17 minutes. The same problem had taken a week when another department handled it. I was still jotting down notes when I got the calendar notification. Meeting with Robert G. 10:30 a.m., executive conference room. No context. Now, Robert Gilman was the newly appointed COO, Harvard MBA, Silicon Valley transplant. The kind of guy who wore $1,200 shoes and referred to himself in third person during meetings. We hadn't spoken more than twice since his arrival 6 months ago. I figured this was a budget review or some interdepartmental request. But when I walked into that sterile, windowless conference room, Robert was sitting alone. No laptop, no tablet, just a manila folder and a smile so fake I could hear it cracking. "Alex, have a seat," he said, gesturing like we were old friends. The moment I sat down, he slid the folder across the table. Inside? A termination letter. Termination. Effective immediately. I blinked. Is this some kind of mistake? He shook his head with that same tight-lipped smirk. It's not personal. Purely cost-cutting. We did the math, 3 junior engineers for your salary. I felt my throat tighten. Not with anger, yet, but disbelief. I wasn't even given the dignity of a warning. A phased exit. Nothing. You're replacing me with 3 kids who've never written mission-critical code, I said quietly. Robert shrugged. It's about scalability. We're streamlining. Streamlining, I repeated. And what happens when their first test launch bricks a $30 million payload because they don't know how to debug a memory leak at 3 a.m.? He stood up, palms flat on the table like a motivational speaker. That's not your concern anymore. You've been generously compensated. HR will process your severance. I was dismissed. Just like that. I nodded. No drama. No begging. Just a polite, I understand, and I walked out with my dignity. But I made damn sure to take my notebooks, personal drive, and prototype plans for our next-gen telemetry system with me. Not IP. Just my own diagrams. Notes. Because let me tell you, those weren't company-made. They were born in my garage at 2 a.m. while my family was asleep. They didn't even know half of what I had in that brain of mine. As I walked out with my box, past the desks I helped design, through the lobby where I once greeted new hires, one thought began to crystallize in my mind. You just lit the wrong fuse. The panic didn't start right away. In fact, for the first week, it was almost boring. I slept in, drank decent coffee for once. I was too exhausted to be angry. My wife, Clara, suggested we take a trip, maybe finally go see Glacier National Park like we'd talked about for years. But then, the call started. First it was Javier, my old systems engineer. "Alex," he whispered, like he thought someone might be listening. "I think Robert's team screwed up the integration patch for that weather satellite contract. It's throwing cascade errors." I told him I couldn't help. NDA and all. But I could hear the fear in his voice. 2 days later, it was Marcy from QA. Then Theo from signal processing. Then a desperate call from my ex-manager, Camille, who had been conveniently out of the loop when I got axed. Their shiny new 3-for-1 replacements? Yeah. They'd crashed the dev server trying to merge 2 production branches on a live network. Then came the bombshell. The Air Force tech rep, a guy named Major Walters I'd worked with on and off for 6 years, called my personal phone. "Foster, you got a minute?" "Sure," I said, curious. "We just received a diagnostic report that doesn't match your specs for the payload monitoring system. Can you confirm if you updated protocols since December?" "I was terminated," I replied. "You'll have to speak to someone else." Long pause. "I trust your work. We'll be filing a formal inquiry if the inconsistencies persist." That's when I knew Robert had no idea how deep he'd cut. But I wasn't about to go back, hat in hand. I had a better idea. I poured myself a scotch, opened my laptop, and started building something of my own. If you've ever wondered what the sound of a company unraveling is, it's this. 3 missed calls from your former boss, followed by a frantic email with the subject line, "Urgent, clarification needed." But let me back up. After I walked out of that conference room, I went home, kissed my wife Clara, and told her I'd been let go. She didn't cry, didn't panic, just placed a cup of tea in my hand and said, "Maybe this is finally your chance." She knew what she meant. I did too. For years, I toyed with the idea of launching my own firm, an independent aerospace consultancy. I had the contacts, the reputation, the credibility. What I didn't have was the time or push. Getting fired was the universe's not-so-subtle boot in the ass. So while Robert Gilman and his cohort of junior engineers were busy setting fires they couldn't put out, I spent the next 2 weeks in my garage, surrounded by printouts, old whiteboards, and a laptop held together with duct tape and spite. I built the foundation for Foster Systems Consulting. Simple branding, sleek site, nothing fancy, just enough to start drawing attention from old colleagues and industry insiders. The real ace up my sleeve? I didn't need to advertise. Word of mouth in aerospace travels faster than radio signals in vacuum. The same Major Walters from before? He passed my name along to 2 private satellite startups within 3 days. By the end of the week, I was sitting in Zoom meetings advising a team in Austin on resolving telemetry sync issues that their very new CTO couldn't wrap his head around. It was thrilling, freeing, and then the desperation truly began. Robert called me directly for the first time since firing me. I let it go to voicemail. His message? "Hey Alex, just checking in. I think there's been some miscommunication with your handover files. We're having trouble locating your legacy documentation for the telemetry framework. When you get a chance, could you reach out?" Miscommunication. Right. I didn't call him back. 2 days later, an email from Camille, my old manager, hit my inbox. It was long, painfully formal. She said they were dealing with several high-priority setbacks and would like to discuss opportunities for limited contractor support to ensure continuity of deliverables. Translation: they needed me. I replied with a single sentence. "I'm currently unavailable for freelance projects at this time." That same day, Javier texted me from a burner number. Apparently, the junior devs had somehow corrupted a firmware deployment to a prototype that was scheduled for a demo in front of Pentagon contractors. I wish I could say I felt guilty, but honestly, all I felt was vindicated. They didn't just fire me. They replaced me with 3 engineers who barely understood our codebase, let alone the critical systems architecture that I developed over a decade. And now, those same systems were falling apart like wet tissue. I'd warned them. I had literally written handbooks. I'd created simulation models so detailed that even NASA once asked me to present them at a tech summit. I had offered, volunteered, to mentor the new hires. But Robert didn't want mentorship. He wanted numbers. 3 for 1, he'd said, like I was a pack of Costco batteries. So I watched, quietly, as the consequences unfolded. But what really made me laugh? What really made me realize that I had leverage? The recruiter emails. 3 separate firms reached out to me, all saying they were urgently hiring for a principal systems architect position at my old company's main competitor, Helios Aerotech. Now that got my attention. Helios was the rival we never mentioned out loud. We all knew they were leaner, faster, and funded by a shadowy group of ex-2D brass with a taste for disruption. Their CEO, Layla Marsh, was a legend, and apparently, she'd heard about my departure. One call later, I was on a private Zoom with her and 2 project leads. No pressure, just a chat. Except that chat ended with her offering me double my old salary, a stock option plan, and full creative control over their next satellite navigation system, something that made what I'd built before look like an antique. And I said no. Not because I wasn't tempted. I was. But I wasn't done watching Robert squirm. A week later, Clara and I finally took that trip to Glacier National Park. It was peaceful, stunning, and in that calm, something clicked. I didn't want to work for anyone anymore. I wanted to build something of my own. So I registered Foster Systems as an LLC. Hired an old friend, Casey, former UI lead who left the company after burnout, to join me part-time as a front-end systems integrator. Then I did something petty. I launched a blog. Not just any blog, The Silent Architect. Anonymous at first. Clean, technical breakdowns of common aerospace failures. Deep dives on why management often overlooks legacy engineers. A few spicy posts about the dangers of overhiring junior staff without tribal knowledge. Every post went viral within the aerospace subreddit, industry Slack channels, and even got shared on LinkedIn by a few program managers I used to work with. Guess who messaged me? Robert Gilman. Subject line: "We need to talk." I ignored it. Next day, he called again. Then Camille. Then the company's CTO, an old friend, left me a voicemail. "Look man, whatever's going on, can you just give us something?" The board is in full-blown panic. The DoD is freezing funds. We can't pass QA. We're weeks from collapse. And still, I said nothing. Until one morning, Clara walked into the kitchen holding her phone and said, "You're not going to believe this. Look who's trending on Reddit." It was a thread titled, "Mid-size aerospace tech firm on verge of losing major contracts after firing lead architect. Sources say new team inexperienced." There was no author name, just links to technical reports, spec sheets, and a timeline that mirrored everything I'd lived. It wasn't me. I didn't post it. But someone had. And the damage was done. By the end of the month, Robert Gilman was no longer employed. Camille stepped down for personal reasons. And I was sitting in my new office, an old converted loft, looking at a whiteboard with our first 6 consulting clients listed. 3 of them were former clients of my old employer. They didn't poach them. The clients left voluntarily and asked if they could work with me directly. My phone rang one more time. I recognized the number. It was Robert. I answered. He sounded hollow. "Alex," he began, "I made a mistake. I didn't speak. I didn't realize how much you held together. We need you. The company needs you. Whatever you want, contract, partnership, salary, just name it. Help us fix this." I let the silence hang. Then I said, "Robert, you told me it wasn't personal. Remember?" Click. After I hung up on Robert, I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, he emailed again. This time, the tone was desperate. "Alex, please. Just an hour of your time. We'll pay your full day rate for a consult. Things are falling apart faster than we can contain. We need a patch on the telemetry framework, or we'll lose the entire Horizon contract." The Horizon contract? That was our company's crown jewel. A multi-phase satellite initiative tied directly to DoD and civilian comms. I'd been the chief architect for 3 of its 6 core modules. If Horizon failed, the company wouldn't just lose clients. It would be blacklisted from government projects for a decade. Still, I ignored him. Instead, I went to lunch with Layla Marsh, CEO of Helios Aerotech. She didn't waste time. "We've watched the fallout. You've built loyalty that can't be replaced. We want you, Alex, not just as talent, but as a partner." That word stuck. Partner. I told her I had no interest in going back to the corporate meat grinder. She said she understood, and then made me an offer. Helios would buy into Foster Systems. A silent investment. I'd keep 100% operational control. They'd just back me financially and strategically. I accepted. By the end of that week, I had office space, a legal team, and my first 3 full-time hires. Engineers who had left Robert's sinking ship. Volunteers, not recruits. Meanwhile, news broke that Horizon was officially suspended. The board cleaned house. Camille gone. The CTO resigned. Robert? No one knew where he went. Some said Europe. Others whispered about a lawsuit. I didn't care. All I knew was this. The man who told me I was too expensive had underestimated the true cost of replacing loyalty with arrogance. And I wasn't done yet. By January, Foster Systems had its first $1 million quarter. I wasn't just surviving, I was eating their lunch. Clients who once signed contracts with my old company now called me directly. Not because I was cheaper. I wasn't. But because they knew my name meant stability. While Robert's former empire scrambled to keep the lights on, my 3-person consultancy was solving problems they couldn't even diagnose. But the twist? They tried to buy me out. A man named Ray Travers reached out, new CEO, brought in to clean up the disaster. Corporate fixer type. Polished. Ivy League. And completely tone-deaf. We met in a glass tower in downtown Seattle. He offered coffee and compliments before sliding a printed proposal across the table. Full acquisition. You'll retain leadership. 7 figures up front. I didn't even touch the paper. You think I want back in that building? I said. After what happened? Ray stayed calm. We understand the prior administration mishandled things. You could rebuild. Bigger. Better. I shook my head. You already lost the trust. That's not something you buy back. That's something you earn, and you burned it. He exhaled, disappointed. I had to try. He did. But like Robert, he didn't get it. They thought this was about money. It never was. It was about respect. About 18 years of dedication dismissed in 5 minutes. About knowing I trained the same engineers they fired a month later, then begged to return. I walked out of that office with a smirk they couldn't wipe off. The next morning, I got a message from Javier. 3 more clients jumped ship. They're going under, man. And all I could think was, good. 3 months after launching Foster Systems, we moved into a bigger office. Not a skyscraper or anything. Just a solid industrial space with high ceilings and a view of the sound. Enough room for my growing team, And, more importantly, our reputation. What we did wasn't flashy. No big marketing budget. No PR campaigns. What we had was credibility. Every time a client defected from my old company, they came with a story. Deadlines missed. No clear leadership. One of their junior engineers literally copied code from Stack Overflow, then didn't change the comments. Meanwhile, we delivered. Quietly. Efficiently. And with zero tolerance for corporate BS. Word got around. By April, we signed our first government contract, directly. Not as subcontractors. Not as support. Primary contractors. That was the final nail in the coffin for my old company. The feds pulled Horizon. They reassigned the project entirely. Guess who got it? Us. Foster Systems. The irony? We used some of my original designs. The same ones I'd taken home in that little cardboard box the day I got fired. Except now, they were stamped with my logo. I got a call from Camille, not to beg, but to apologize. She said, I should have fought harder. I let him cut the wrong person. I didn't gloat. I didn't rage. I just told her, it's too late. You weren't silent. You were complicit. Then I hung up. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't some grand explosion. It was quiet. I succeeded. They collapsed. And every time I walked past our glass door etched with the words, Foster Systems, I was reminded. They fired me thinking I was a liability. Turns out, I was the foundation. 6 months after my firing, the company that once told me I was too expensive filed for Chapter 11. Publicly, they blamed unforeseen market shifts. Privately, everyone in the industry knew better. They'd gutted their core team, chased away talent, prioritized short-term savings over long-term survival, and they put a Harvard suit in charge of engineers. Bad call. I watched it unfold from my office window, coffee in hand, as headlines started popping up. Mid-tier aerospace firm implodes after talent exodus. Former employees launch rival company. Now hold majority of government contracts. I wasn't even the one leaking that info. The truth had its own legs. Funny thing is, I didn't hate them. Not anymore. You can't hate what's already dead. But karma? Karma was doing its job beautifully. Robert Gilman never reappeared. Rumor was he took a job in Dubai, running ops for a drone startup. Still talking in buzzwords. Still wearing $1,000 shoes. Still clueless. And the best part? We started hiring. People I once mentored. People who left after the chaos. People who had been told they were replaceable, now had offers with us. Better pay. More flexibility. Full respect. I even rehired Theo, the guy they demoted to make room for Robert's pet hires. First thing Theo said when he saw our new facility? This is what we always wanted to build. I nodded. Now we get to. Foster Systems wasn't just revenge. It was restoration. Of pride. Of passion. Of people. The empire that cast me out crumbled. In its ashes, we planted something better. And it was just getting started. A lot changed after the Horizon project landed in our lap. What started as a consulting firm was now leading development on a high-priority government system. Something I never thought I'd do on my own terms. But then I got a call that changed everything. It wasn't a recruiter. It wasn't a client. It was the Department of Defense. Not some middleman contractor. A direct line from an agency I'd never even heard from before. One of those three-letter ones that don't send emails, just encrypted briefings. They'd followed our work. They'd seen how we salvaged Horizon in weeks, after my old company botched it for a year. They reviewed our code, audited our logs, interviewed our team, and then they invited me to DC for a closed-door meeting. Clara looked worried. Is this safe? I laughed. I think if they wanted me gone, I'd already be in a van. The meeting was surreal. Suits. Security. No phones. A massive round table with guys who looked like they didn't blink often. The pitch? They wanted us, Foster Systems, to oversee a next-generation defense satellite system. One that had been stuck in R&D hell for years. Billions on the line. I asked the man across from me, why us? His reply? Because you built something they couldn't. And you did it with half the budget and zero bureaucracy. The deal was clear. If we took it, we wouldn't just be a consultancy anymore. We'd be a prime defense contractor. It was everything I'd once dreamed of when I was a junior engineer, back when I thought loyalty meant safety. Now I understood. Loyalty is earned. But legacy? Legacy is built. And for the first time in my life, I was building mine. We signed the contract. Multi-year. 9 figures. More responsibility than we'd ever carried and more scrutiny. Suddenly, Foster Systems wasn't a quiet underdog anymore. We were on the radar. Contractors started calling. So did competitors. News outlets. Senators. Lobbyists. We hired security. We brought in lawyers. We vetted every email twice. It was exhilarating. But I won't lie, it was exhausting too. And then, the ghosts came back. It started with an email. From Camille. I'm consulting now. I'd love to reconnect. Maybe even collaborate. Then Javier messaged. Then two others I'd once mentored, who stayed with the old company too long and were left stranded when it collapsed. Some of them just wanted jobs. Others wanted forgiveness. And a few? They wanted credit. Alex, you wouldn't have made it without our early work on the framework. I read the messages. I deleted most of them. Because here's the thing about revenge, it burns hot and fast, but building something real? That stays. I didn't need to clap back. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Every time I walked into our new satellite control lab, filled with engineers I chose, working on systems we owned, I remembered. I wasn't here because I wanted to get even. I was here because I'd already won. But winning comes with weight. Deadlines loomed. Audits intensified. We had our first internal failure, just a test rig, but it rattled the team. One of the junior engineers broke down in my office, convinced he'd cost us everything. I told him what no one ever told me. One mistake won't define you. Quitting will. He stayed. And I realized. I wasn't just running a company anymore. I was building the kind of leadership I never had. As our contracts expanded, so did the team. 30 full-time staff. 2 locations. Partnerships across 3 states. Foster Systems was no longer a consulting firm. It was a movement. And I was becoming something I never expected. A mentor. One afternoon, a young engineer named Maya came into my office. Nervous. Fidgety. She just finished debugging a telemetry relay protocol no one else could untangle. I messed up earlier, she said. It delayed the whole testing schedule. I looked at her printout. I smiled. Yeah, I said. And then you fixed it. That's the job. Her eyes welled up. I thought you'd be mad. I wasn't. Because I saw something in her I remembered in myself. Raw talent, and no one willing to back it. When I was her age, I got silence when I succeeded and scolding when I stumbled. Robert never saw people, just numbers. Camille smiled in meetings, but never shielded us when upper management cracked the whip. I made a promise then. No one under me would ever wonder where they stood. That same week, we were invited to keynote at a national aerospace summit. The same one Robert once blocked me from attending, saying I was too technical to be presentable. No, I was the main speaker. I stood in front of 400 engineers and executives, lights glaring, and told them everything. About loyalty. About respect. About what happens when you value people over profits. And at the end, I said this. I got fired for being too expensive. But the real cost? Was losing the one person who could have saved the company. The applause was long. Real. And when I stepped off that stage, Maya was waiting, tears in her eyes. You're the reason I stayed in this field, she said. And that meant more than every contract combined. A year to the day after I was fired, I returned to the building where it all started. Not for vengeance. For closure. The old company's logo had been stripped from the glass. The lobby was silent. Empty offices. Just on the welcome desk. A for-lease sign curled in the front window. Clara stood beside me, holding my hand. You want to go in? She asked. I shook my head. I already walked out once. That was enough. I turned and faced the opposite side of the street, where Foster Systems now had its headquarters. 4 floors. A rooftop deck. A lab that could rival anything in Silicon Valley. I smiled. Inside, the team was prepping for our biggest launch yet. A joint project with Helios Aerotech. Real-time orbital tracking for disaster response satellites. This one would help save lives. Not just contracts. Lives. I stepped into the elevator, and as it rose, I thought about everything it took to get here. The betrayal. The silence. The humiliating walkout with my box. The rebuild. The hires. The tears. The long nights. The quiet mornings where doubt crept in. And then I stepped onto the floor, greeted by laughter, problem-solving chatter, and engineers doing the impossible with smiles on their faces. People I respected. People who respected me. That day, Maya gave me a framed plaque she made herself. It read, "You weren't too expensive. You were priceless." I don't know if Robert ever saw it or cared, but I didn't build this for him. I built this for every person who's been overlooked, undervalued, cut for cost, told to stay in their lane, told they weren't worth it. I built this to prove them all wrong. So if you're watching this and you've been burned, fired, betrayed, remember this. You are not the job that let you go. You are what you choose to build after. And that's where the story really begins.